Good morning and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Buddy. We drop a new podcast every Friday morning with a new story that will impact someone, and we hope that someone is you. Thank you to all the listeners each week that take the time and hear our stories, and we know it's going to impact somebody. We hope that somebody is you. So please take a moment to subscribe and just share this on your favorite social media platform. Give us a review, and we appreciate that. Quick announcement, here on June 10th, there's going to be a men's conference here in Salem, Oregon. It's called the Pacific Northwest Men's Conference. Should be about 2,000 men there. It's going to be pretty awesome. Get signed up right away. This morning, I have a new guest, and I'm excited to introduce him. His name's Manny Martinez. Welcome, Manny.
Thank you, buddy. Good to be here.
Dude, it's good to have you, man. So we're gonna chat about you, and you and I met, I think, about 3 months ago, give or take. Bonnie Mileto introduced us virtually, and we met, and we had a great conversation at Icebox. Remember that?
I do, indeed.
You know, I didn't know anything about you, but there's a story here that I can't wait to let this unfold. But so, what I know about you is you're a private guitar instructor. You have 50 plus students. It's pretty amazing. I think you're around 30 years old.
38.
You're 38?
Mm-hmm.
Dude, I was off for about 8 years, so.
I'm flattered. Thank you.
30, 38, hey, it's all the same. You are the leader of Manny Martinez Jazz Quartet that performs regularly in and around Salem. You have a bachelor's degree in music from Berklee College of Music in Boston, Massachusetts. You're a leader of a rock band, Birth of Happiness. I see that on social media everywhere, so I want you to talk more about that. I don't really know the full story, but you guys are recording your first full-length original rock album this August. So, you know, based upon that, life's pretty good, man. You everything's great. There's been no problems in your life, but I think there's a deeper story here, and I've heard part of it, and I want to hear a little bit more. So I don't know how to segue into this here. Where do you want to go? Do you want to back up a little bit?
Well, I'll start with where things are at right now, and things are going great. I will say I'm a very blessed individual, and I thank God every day for all the blessings, including the second chance in life that I've been given that so many people don't get. My bread and butter is teaching private guitar lessons. It has been for the last couple of years. I have a studio in downtown Salem off of Commercial Street. Have 50 plus private students, which is something I'm very proud of. It took a long time to build up that clientele. And not only do I have 50 plus students, but they're all very good people. I got a great stable of students that study with me, and they're a great group of people. They come to the shows and they're very supportive, and a lot of them have become friends. So it's that's been a huge blessing. And
So real quick, what are the ages of your students?
I think the youngest is like 8 or 9, and the oldest is about to turn 76.
There's hope for a guy like me, if all if he wasn't.
Yeah, I get the question of like what the age limit is, and usually like around 3rd or 4th grade is when a student would be really capable of taking the guitar on if they're pretty mature for their age. And kids' hands are pretty small at that age, so usually you want to start them with piano, vocals, or drums. Around 7 or 8 years old, they can be comfortable with the guitar, but then it's a matter of if they can sit in a chair for 30 minutes straight. It's a question to ask of the adults sometimes too, but yeah. But yeah, the guitar lessons are going great, and then on top of that, the jazz quartet has really taken off. I spent last year really focusing on making the jazz quartet viable through connections at the Salem Chamber of Commerce, which I'm a active member of, and just the music community and a lot of grinding. We've gone from playing the typical kind of like bar gigs that are not terribly lucrative to now we get a lot of the highly sought after kind of gigs in town, and the private events and the nice places in town that actually pay musicians well. So that's going really well. And then the real dream has always been to have like the Pink Floyd level rock band. And that's where I have my original music, where I'm the front man and sing all original music. And that has been quite an undertaking.
So you're a singer, songwriter, as well as a guitar.
Yeah, most people know me for being a guitar player, and makes sense because that's the majority of what I've done in Salem. But I'm starting to make the shift into being more of a vocalist as well. And for Birth of Happiness, BOH, I'm the front man. Like, I have another guitar player that does a lot of the heavy lifting for me so that I can play the role of front man and jump around and scream and, you know, do the whole crazy-eyed thing to the crowd.
I can't wait to come watch you. Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and there's something very therapeutic about, you know, screaming into a microphone, especially when it's something that you really believe. To put to really powerful rock music that I've written with my mentor, a guy named Brian Baker, who is a guy named the guy that I met at Berkeley, and he's like a Mozart type music genius. So he has, his fingerprints are in this music in a considerable way, and that's part of what makes this project very, very special. We have been rehearsing, this particular group of guys has been rehearsing the last 8 or 9 months. We rehearsed in an unheated garage during the winter. I like to joke that it was like the scene from Rocky IV, you know, whereas like his opponent Drago is in like the super sophisticated, like high-tech gym, but Rocky's out there like carrying a log in like the Russian tundra. And I say to the guys in the band, it's like when they make the BOH movie, this makes it much more compelling, you know, like we have to suffer a little bit.
I love it. Yeah, embrace the suffering, man.
Indeed. So yeah, things are going very well. We played the first big premiere show of Birth of Happiness at the Yard a couple weeks ago. There was, you know, hundreds of people there. We had the full light show, and we enlisted the help of a lot of people in town to make that show the success that it was. The video is being put together as we speak, and that'll be up on the website birthofhappiness.com pretty soon. And we're going to use that to get more gigs, and we're already getting a lot of offers for some pretty nice stuff. So once we have the video and once we have the album recorded, which is like the real, that's the main event, is getting that album recorded in August. It's expensive. And this last year has been about raising the funds to make that happen. Once we have the album recorded and all the other things that we need, we're going to hit it really hard. And the goal is to have a West Coast tour, have it be successful too. Not just like calling a bunch of random bars down the West Coast. I'm talking about getting like in some premier places and walking away with a profitable situation. So
yeah. This is all you're to do, and these are all original songs that you've written.
Me and my mentor, Brian Baker. Yeah.
Well, I can't wait, man. And do you have a show set up here, like in Salem, like Elsinore or anything coming up?
Yes, the next one is at the Bad Space, which is part of Santiam Brewery. It's a newer venue. It's very cool. It's like a real rock and roll club. And there's a stage and the lights and the sound is all built in, so it's going to be a lot less of a headache than what we had to do with our last show, where we had to bring all of that stuff in. Right. This we can just kind of like walk in with our instruments and set up quickly and play. So it's the other show was great because it's a huge venue and there's always a ton of people there, but it was just more complicated. So this is going to be fundraiser number 2 to try to continue to raise funds for this album, and it's on June 23rd at the Bad Space.
Okay, let's get that out there. I'm sure it'll be on social media. How much money are you guys trying to raise anyway?
Around $25,000.
Piece of cake, right?
Yes, it's one of those numbers that it's like it's a big number and a small number at the same time.
Right. It's a big number because you've never been there before, but relatively speaking, it's not a big number.
I know that like 5 years from now, I'm gonna look back at this and laugh at the fact that like the 25 grand was the hill to climb. But I understand that it had to. This is like the perfect story. It had to be this way, to scratch and claw for every little bit of it, so that there could be full appreciation for the effort. If it's a funny thing how God works, where 2 years ago I thought the best thing that could have happened in my life would to have been gifted like 50 grand by someone or something so that I could just knock this thing out. But the music would not have been as good as it is right now. I never would have joined the chamber and developed all the connections that I have now and friendships that I have now, so that there's actually a town of people that are like eagerly anticipating the release of this album. I wouldn't have met you, probably. I wouldn't have met Bonnie. So it was through having to wait and grind that I've taken this path of going to places like the chamber and other networking groups and really getting involved in the community and making this like a community effort. And it makes the story so much better. And that's part of what people love always is a story. It's one of the most ancient principles of human existence, is like give people a great story. And this is basically like the musical Rocky. And that's what I like to think of. Like, this is like the Rocky Balboa story, except, you know,
It would be exciting if you show up and everything was perfect, you pay your money, and there's no story there.
Yeah.
But the adversity that you go through, that's what people love to see, is what did you go through to get to where you're at? How bad did you bleed to arrive? And nobody arrives, but, and I like you're talking about community effort. This is not just you, Manny. You're bringing everybody into the story. I want to be a part of your story.
Yeah.
You know, it's your story, but I want to be a part of it, man. You're asking me, and Richie here too, you're asking us to be part of your story.
I love the fact that it's turned out this way, and it's a community effort. It's like, this is going to be Salem's album. I want to do something that has the potential to be like a major musical accomplishment that happens right here in downtown Salem. And I mean, there's been a lot of great talent and a lot of great bands in Salem, but I'm going for something that is going to compete with like the top level rock and roll bands out there, and have it be something that goes nationwide. And I love the idea of it originating here in Salem.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, you mentioned Pink Floyd, but who's your favorite rock and roll band? Is it Pink Floyd, or you have maybe a top 5?
Well, Pink Floyd is definitely what started the whole obsession.
Yeah.
I was always really into music. I can remember being six years old and listening to cassette tapes of Metallica and Michael Jackson. They're two different styles, but they both are great. And the guitar playing always spoke to me. I always thought that the guitar was just like the coolest thing, and I still think it's the coolest thing. It simply is the coolest thing. It's not really even up for discussion. It's just like guitar equals cool. But the guitar always spoke to me. My parents were never really that into the idea of me playing the guitar as a kid. I played the trumpet, which was really important because I played all the way through high school. My high school band teacher, Mr. Paxton, was one of the great influences of my life, one of the best men I've ever known. And that trumpet playing experience was vital because I got to learn how to read music really well. That gave me a lot of tools when I went to music school that a lot of the other guitar players didn't have. But when I was 13 years old, I walked into the room and my sister was watching The Wall, the Pink Floyd film version of the album The Wall. And I sat down. I had no idea who Pink Floyd was, never heard of them. I sat down, listened to the music, and it blew me away. I was just like, spiritual experience. Yeah. And I got the album and started listening to it just at 13. I was obsessed with the album The Wall by Pink Floyd. I couldn't stop listening to it, and the guitar playing especially. And all guitar nerds out there know that the guy from Pink Floyd, David Gilmour, is like, guitar god. And he's the man. And so much of it is not just his guitar playing, but the context in which the guitar playing exists, which is the Pink Floyd songs. So that's when I went to my mother and I was like, I don't understand why you won't let me try. And that broke her heart. And of course, like she gave in, and we went to the music store and signed up for lessons. And the funny thing was that they thought it would be a deterrent to get me private lessons. Like, okay, so you want private lessons? Like, well, it's like, you want to play the guitar, so we're going to get you private lessons and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, sure, great. And this, from day one, I remember the moment that I took the guitar out of the case and I was like, this is it. This is my thing. I'm going for it. This is the dream. And it's like, I'm either going to make it or I'm going to die trying. That's what I said. That's a commitment I made to myself when I was 13 years old.
That's a great story. All right. Well, take us back a little bit. I want to hear a little about your story, just life in general. Mm-hmm. Tell me about how you grew up, how many siblings you got, how your parents still married. Uh-huh. Tell us about that, and then to your journey where you are today. You're having extreme success. but not everybody has extreme success overnight. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, the punchline of my story at the moment is like I like to start out with all these great things are happening. The rock band is about to become a thing. I'm literally going after the boyhood dream and have a realistic chance of making it happen. I mean, who knows? Anything can happen. I mean, you have this horrible accident that just happened on the highway yesterday, and 7 people lose their lives. And I'm always aware that just like, every day is a gift, but for the moment, God willing, like I'm going for the dream and I have a realistic chance of making it happen. And that is just, I think there's like no better way to live than to be like going after your dream in a real way and have your dream be something that's good for the world. Yeah. Right now, this is where things are now. But 4 years ago, I was basically as close to dead as you can possibly be. You wouldn't recognize me if you saw me 4 years ago. I was about 100 to 120 pounds heavier than I was, and I was severely, severely addicted to alcohol. And I didn't realize at the time, number one, that I was an alcoholic. But then once I got into recovery, I was just like, oh man, not only are you an alcoholic, but you're an extreme case. Like even people in recovery are just like, wow, like that's a low.
This is 4 years ago. 4 years. At 34 years old, you're almost dead.
Yes. Yes. Should be dead. I mean, I'm in the miracle category. Not only to be alive, but to be in good health too. I mean, it's like, it doesn't make sense other than like the hand of God saying like, no, like I have something that I have for you to do. Like you're not supposed to die like this. Okay. But I think you only get like 1 or 2 like stern warnings like that before it's like, okay, now you get it. Okay. Now you got to learn to behave. Right. But going back to your question, I grew up in Baltimore, not like in the city, but like in the nice suburb part in Baltimore County. I went to Delaney High School, which is important to my story because that's where Mr. Paxton was.
Okay.
And he
was your high school?
He's my high school band teacher.
Okay.
And he's the kind of guy that every man should strive to be like. He was a war hero, but also after his service, he went to school and studied psychology and music. And he was like if you ever seen the movie Mr. Holland's Opus, he's Mr. Holland. I mean, he touched so many lives. When he passed away, there was like 1,000 people that showed up to his service, his celebration of life. And those people that had him as a teacher in elementary school, and 30 years later, they travel across the country to pay their respects. Like that's the kind of impact that this guy had on people's lives. So he was my band teacher. And it's like, he's one of the guys that I credit towards like planting a seed that probably kept me alive, because it was just like that little bit of light that I could, grab onto, just like that kind of influence of like, remember that guy and that he believed in you, right? So I went to high school at Delaney. He was a huge influence. I ended up going to Berklee College of Music, which is regarded as one of the top schools in the world. That's where I met Brian when we were teenagers. I was like 17, he was 16, and he was on a full scholarship, and he was the genius of the class. But yeah. And part of the story that's interesting is that like I always was like so envious of Brian. He was the top guy. Like when the famous musicians would come in, he was like in the all-star student band, and I was one of the more like the slightly above average students. I was like toiling away in the practice room, and 20 years later is when I reach out to him at the beginning of COVID to take some lessons. And that began the whole process of us writing an album together.
So you guys hadn't touched base during this time?
No, and I didn't even really know him when I went to Berklee. I had like two encounters with him, but I was a fan basically. And at the beginning of COVID, he was offering some discounted lessons, kind of like as a service. And I decided to take a few, just more from like a recovery aspect. Like, okay, let's humble ourselves and see if this guy has some advice to offer. And that was the beginning of putting together the music that we're about to record in August. So we've worked together for about 3 years. But during Berkeley, I basically just sat in a practice room and practiced 8 to 10 hours a day, and that's like on top of going to class. Yeah, I was living a very unhealthy lifestyle as far as just working all the time. I would sleep like 2 hours before class and 2 hours after class, and then practice like 8 to 10 hours a day. The people at Berkeley thought I was odd because I practiced that much, and that's like at one of the most competitive music schools in the world. So I just did that for like 3 years or so and burned out, predictably. So, and I looked around and I saw like all the other college kids were having fun and they were going out and partying and stuff. And I was like, I want some of that. That looks fun. I need some friends. And you go out and you start drinking. And I didn't really start drinking until I was like 20 years old, which for a lot of alcoholics is kind of like late to the game. But in true like Manny fashion, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to be the best at it, right?
That's kind of the wire.
Yeah, exactly. So once I started drinking, I started hitting it hard, man, and very quickly became addicted. I would say by age 22, I was full blown alcoholic, and that's when I went on. It was when I went on my cruise ship gig. That was a 6-month contract about a year after.
So you're playing music on a cruise ship. Okay.
The cruise ship gig is sort of like if you watch like one of those late night shows like Kimmel or Colbert or whatever, they have the 7-piece band and they perform a lot of different functions. Someone comes up on stage and they play, and but they can also entertain the crowd for long periods of time. So the cruise ship gig was actually really beneficial musically. It's a hard gig to get. You have to be a really good player. You come out a much better musician, but then you have the environment. And it was just like a normal thing for everyone to just be drinking like heavily or even alcoholically on the ship. So it's like, it wasn't unusual. But then you get back on land and you've developed that addiction, and then there you go. Now you've got a demon attached to you. So that was basically the beginning of a downward spiral that lasted for about another 6 years or so until I was like 29 years old. I was living in Baltimore, playing gigs, bar gigs, and teaching lessons. And
so music's been in this the whole way through.
Oh, for sure.
But just with a lot of
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was still performing, and I think that's why I was getting away with it, because I could still play the guitar really well, even when I was drunk. And like people just like thought it was the cool rock star thing to do, right? I mean, that's what we've been conditioned to think. Oh, there's like the drunk guy on the guitar, he's having a great time, and think his life must be really, really fun. And there were some fun moments like that, but man, it starts to become not fun quite quickly. And in my case, it was like 14 years of like progressive downward spiral, where when I was 29, I decided to do one of the really typical alcoholic moves, which is geographical relocation. Like if I just move across the country, my problems will be solved, right? I just need a fresh start, right? So I came out here and I had my list of new rules, and the drinking part was on there. I had my limitations, and that lasted for about like 5 seconds. The first time I tried drinking again out here, it was just like one of the worst nights of my life, and would have served as a perfectly good bottom, but it didn't quite do the trick. That was just the beginning of like a 6-year bender that I had once I came here to Salem. And this time was much worse than Baltimore. And in Baltimore, it was more of like your typical 20-year-old dude just out there acting like an a-hole and just getting into trouble, and drunk driving arrest and getting into fights and stuff. But when I came to Salem, that's like where like the darkness like really started to like take hold in a much, much worse way, because my tolerance was so high that I could get away with just doing day-to-day stuff, not getting into trouble. I didn't have a car, so I wasn't going to get arrested, and that was a calculated move. I was like, I'm not going to get a car because I know that I'll drive and I'll get in trouble. So, and that will get in the way of my drinking. Yeah, when you're an addict, everything is to support the addiction.
Yeah, it revolves around that one thing.
So having a car would have been very convenient, but I knew that it would end badly, and then I wouldn't be able to drink. So like, I need to. Everything is done in order to support the addiction. You make just enough money to be able to, like in my case, pay your rent and then drink, and then there's like $8 left over for like a 2-liter of soda and like 2 frozen pizzas. It's like that's what my lifestyle was like. So I was like just like a total loser, and even worse, like my health was starting to deteriorate
because now you weighed a lot more.
Oh yeah. So I was well over 300 pounds. The highest weight I ever saw on the scale was 306, although I do think it was higher than that because like there was quite a period longer after that 306 that I continued on with the lifestyle, and I think I even got bigger than that. But yeah, 306 was the top weight that I saw. I remember going to the doctor's office one time, and they go to weigh you, and like the regular scale, like it maxes out, right? That could have been another good bottom moment, but it wasn't. They had to pull out like the special like steel scale from the wall to for the over 300-pound people, and it was like total humiliation. But it's like that certainly didn't do the trick. So I just kept going on the way that I was, and then it was in the last year of my drinking that things started to get total pure hell, because I would wake up every single day coughing up blood. And that's when it was just like, okay, it's like, now you're dying. Now you're dying. And this is like the insanity of alcoholism, where I would wake up every day, you cough up blood, and depending on how much blood I coughed up, I would measure like, okay, like it was only a little bit today, so things are looking all right, so I'll go ahead and drink. And then on other days, it would be a lot, and you cough up a lot of blood, and it's like, uh-oh. Like, well, I better not stop drinking, because if I stop too abruptly, I'll die from the withdrawals. So
either way, your mindset, just keep drinking.
Yeah, just keep drinking.
That was the answer. And
just keep drinking. It's like it really is just like a demon, just like slowly torturing you to the lowest point before it just like takes you out completely. So that went on for like a year, right? And the worst of it, as far as the physical, was that there was like probably 3 different episodes where I would wake up with a horrible feeling in my stomach, like deep in my stomach. Wasn't really pain, but it was just like deep discomfort, burning kind of thing. And you run into the bathroom because you think you need to relieve yourself, right? And you run into the bathroom to do what we all do in the bathroom. It's like, but the only thing that comes out is blood. It's a massive amounts of blood. I remember just going to clean myself, and you pull back a hand just like covered in blood. And I remember just sitting there thinking like, I'm going to die like this. I'm going to die like this. And I'm thinking like, okay, maybe it's a fluke, so it only happened one time. Like an hour later, it comes out again. This would go on for days. And I was still performing like this, right? And I would be out at I was playing a lot at this place Shotsky's at the time. It just got bought up by some other people, but I remember just holding myself up at the bar because I was about to lose consciousness because I was losing so much blood. And I hear this story all the time now of people losing their life that way, either through bleeding out one end or the other, and I basically had both. So that's why I'm very serious when I say like I'm in the miracle category, the should be dead multiple times over, and I take it very, very seriously that my life has been spared. Now that happened multiple times, and I still didn't stop. I had an experience that I was very desperate. And I called out to God and just said, show me something.
Before this real quick, did God have a place in your life growing up? Or is this like the very first time, like, okay, God, the Lord?
No, I grew up Catholic, and always believed. But I think I just had a very arrogant view. I just thought that I could get away with anything. I had no understanding of like what the rules were. Yeah. And I was just like, well, I went to Berkeley and I worked really hard. I should just be able to like, why isn't this thing happening for me? Like I just had this horrible, arrogant attitude. And I thought that everyone should just be super stoked on me, the way that I was.
Yeah.
I mean, it was this arrogance, but at the core of it was like a deep self-hatred. And I guess it's kind of complicated to pick that all apart. But that's essentially what it was. It was like this superiority complex, that was masking like a deep insecurity. And I was using alcohol to feel that fake confidence that I wanted to have, that I get to enjoy now as a sober person for real. But man, it took a while to be able to get that. Because like when you get sober, it's like you're not feeling so hot about yourself at the beginning. It takes a while. But yeah, I had an experience where I talked. I was talking to God, but actually to circle back, like I absolutely had a belief, and as far as the Christian faith element, I was always just talking more directly to God instead of following the footsteps of Christ. So that came later on in recovery, where I started going to church again. And now I consider myself like an ardent follower of Christ. But I was always very much connected to God and the idea of him. So I had this really deep experience where I felt connected, and he basically said to me in very clear terms, like, you can have a life beyond your wildest dreams. Like, I have something for you to do. And like and I was seeing like the whole sky open up to me, and like every benevolent force out in the universe. And I had this unbelievable experience that's really hard to describe. But he said, like, you can have it all and even more than you thought, but you have to stop drinking. Like, you can't drink. And that was the first time that I stopped for any considerable amount of time. That was like 28, 29 days I stopped drinking after that. But then I went back one more time because like I thought I had it under control. I was like, okay, like I had this experience, and like I think I'm cool now. Like I hadn't admitted to myself that I was an alcoholic yet. A friend of mine had brought over, I had been kicked out of my apartment that I was in at the time, and I moved into this horrible little studio, and a friend of mine brought over like a housewarming gift of like a 6-pack of beer. And I thought, okay, this is a good test for my new way of thinking and my new way of mind, because I've got this under control now, right? I just had my big experience. And so I had one, and I was like, okay, this is like, I'm cool. And then we go out to a couple bars, and, you know, one after another, and then you get home and you drink the rest of the 6-pack. And the next day I was back on it. And that started like an 8-day bender, where at the end of that 8 days, I ended up outside of one of the popular Salem bars at like 2 a.m, and I couldn't move. And that was the first time that it happened to me, that I'd like lost use of my body, but my mind was still going with all this insane drinking. And I was doing like 30 to 35 drinks a day on average. With all this like insane drinking, like I was in a blackout drinker. And I think that's like almost as bad as it is not, like, because, you know, I remember everything, right? It's like some of the blackout people, it's like, it's a bad thing when you black out because you can't remember, but at least you don't have to remember like all the horrible stuff that you did. But in my case, I never blacked out. And in this case, I was laying there motionless. I could not move. And I was like, oh my God, this has never happened. My mind is still going, and I'm seeing the people walking by me and the way that they looked at me. And they're just like the disgust that they had for me as I laid there as one of these people on the street now. And I looked over, and I saw like another lost soul passed out on the street, like we see every day here in Salem. And I looked over, and I said to myself, there you go, Manny. Like, you've arrived. You are now one of these people. And at that moment, because I still had some friends in town, like the security guy, who was a very large, insanely strong guy, managed to pick up over 300 pounds of dead weight and load me into a cab. And I made it back to my apartment. And I remember literally crawling on my hands and feet to get to my front door. It took me like 30 minutes to be able to operate the key to get into my apartment because I was so messed up. And then I just like fell like into my couch, passed out for a few hours. I woke up, I drank a 12 pack of beer because I wanted that to be that. No, that was the withdrawal, because I was like, okay, this is going to be the last thing I drink because I don't want to die from the withdrawal. So I'm going to come down a little bit. That 12 pack was the last thing I ever drank. And then the next day I went into my first meeting and started the process of recovery.
Well, Manny, this is awesome, and I can't wait to see the birth of happiness. I can't wait to see you live. Yeah, you're gonna bring something great to the city, and hopefully to the nation.
And can I just say one more thing too about the recovery process, is that the thing that I learned almost immediately was that living sober and the process of recovery is a practice. And it's not like you go into this and then you recover and then you're done. Oh, I'm all better. It's not like having a surgery or something. It's adopting a new way of life, a new way of thinking that's an everyday practice. You have to decide to practice it every day. It's very much like going to the gym. You can get into awesome shape and then lose it quickly if you stop doing the work.
Or playing guitar.
Playing the guitar.
You obviously still practice, I'll bet.
Sure, yeah, and I practice music. I practice my fitness, and the fitness is a good analogy because everyone can relate to like how easy it is to get out of shape even once you get into really good shape. The spiritual fitness is the same deal, and that's a term we use in recovery. But the thing with recovery is if you get lazy and you stop practicing, the result can be deadly, and often is. Practice, my friends.
Practice.
That's my main message. It's practice.
Well said. You know, being in the program, assuming AA, and your hat, valor mentoring, the whole mentoring thing. Mr. Paxton from high school. Mm-hmm. Think about all those people who mentored you along the way and makes you who you are today. On your own, do you think you could ever have made it?
No, definitely not. Yeah, and that's a really important part of the message too. In fact, the first song on our album is going to be called Reach Out. And the whole point of the song is to reach out for help, because it is on the individual to do the work. And that's part of what's missing in this whole conversation of what happens here in Salem with all the people that we have out on the street. It's like, yes, we want to help them, obviously, but there has to be participation from the individual. You have to participate in your own rescue. The amount of people who have helped me through this whole process has been extraordinary. However, I do think that people attract people to help them if they are willing to be helped. It's those who are not willing to accept the help that really have the main issue. And the question will be for our society is like, at what point do we start to insist? Because I was becoming a burden on the rest of society, and that's the truth. I was like just taking and taking and taking and not contributing. And my behavior created a lot of problems for other people. And I'm really, really fortunate that, whether I was behind the wheel of a car or anything else, that the really terrible things didn't happen. I was very fortunate in that sense. But when you behave this way, you do become a burden to the rest of society, and it needs to be deemed as unacceptable at a certain point.
That's interesting coming from you, who you feel like you were there. So
I was there.
You were a burden to society, and Mm-hmm. Well, and sometimes we have to hit rock bottom, maybe more than once, to have a little humility. Pride and arrogance and cockiness and do it myself is not the answer, but realize that you need help. Maybe you recognize your friend who picked you up, put you in the cab. Maybe that was a trigger for you.
Perhaps.
It helped you. I don't know. But somewhere along the way, somebody helped you, and you're now remembering who those people are.
Well, it was more so about when I showed up to recovery, and I made it clear that I was very serious about getting well. I mean, people who I had never met before that knew nothing about me, they had never seen me play a guitar, they didn't care about that element at all. I was immediately surrounded by people that were new people to me that started helping me just by giving me rides and offering to answer the phone whenever I needed to talk about this. And I mean, the recovery programs that are widely used, I mean, it takes a while to get the hang of it. There's a lot of information, and you need people to help you through it. And it's also so important to be around other people who have been there, because when I go into a recovery room, I can talk about what it's like to live in hell, and I see a bunch of people nodding and saying, but when I'm hanging around normies, like they don't get it.
Don't quite get it.
And nor should they. They haven't been there, and thank God for that. But if you want to be able to pull other people out of hell, you better know what the landscape is, and that requires some experience.
Yeah.
When I've had a couple conversations with people on the streets, and they always start talking about demons, man. They always start talking about demons. I'll never forget this one encounter I had with a young guy who was like freshly homeless. You knew, because like you can tell when they have like all of their stuff, and yeah, exactly. And he was obviously in a very bad way. And I started talking to him about this stuff and like the darkness and everything. He was like, "Oh my God, you see it, you can see it. No one else has been able to see it." I was like, "I know exactly what you're talking about, bro. I know exactly what you're talking about." And I pointed him over to the UGM. I was like, if I were in your shoes, that is where I would go, like day one.
Right.
They can help you. And who knows? He walked off in that direction. I can only hope that he took the advice. But you absolutely need help. But we also have to have the expectation of the individual to do some work. And that's where you get your dignity back, is when you start. And that's when you start to get some self-respect. A lot of good-hearted people have this idea that if we just need to give them housing, or we just need to give them a checking account. It's like, no. If you would have taken me at the height of my addiction and given me $1 million and a free apartment, it just would have killed me. It would have just sped up the process. If you would have introduced money into my situation, it's the worst possible thing you could have done for me. I had to learn how to live properly. I had to learn a new set of rules of how to conduct myself. I didn't understand how to live without alcohol. I had never learned how to behave properly. Yeah.
Dude, man, it's been great. I appreciate you being on the podcast today, just sharing your story. Hey, if a couple things. Is there anything left that you wanted to share that maybe you just want covered? And then how would somebody reach out to you if they want to hear a little more of your story, if they want to learn about how to be a student of yours or come to one of your concerts? How will they do that?
My main website is mannymartinezguitar.com, and you can also find me on social media, Instagram, Birth of Happiness 19. You can search for me on Facebook, and you'll see a picture of me like with my guitar. Yeah. Like, I'm pretty easy to find. So mannymartinezguitar.com, look for me on social media. You can Google Birth of Happiness or Google Manny Martinez Guitar, and I'm just always around here in Salem. Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. So
yeah, well, cool. Well, thanks for being part of the show. Thanks for you listening every week. We appreciate you. We hope and pray that this podcast will impact you. Please share with somebody that you think needs to hear this story, that maybe is addicted to alcohol or drugs and needs a new life. So life can happen. God can do all things. And this is a great story. 34 years old, guy is 38, and he's a new guy. So thank you very much. Have a great week.